Recovery Rockstars Uncut.
What's up, and welcome to Recovery Rockstars Uncut. I'm your host, Kevin Z. On this episode, I sit down with Danny Boy O'Connor. Man, is his story insane. From House of Pain to the Outsiders House Museum, we literally cover it all in Danny's amazing recovery journey. As you guys are going to hear, man, Danny's been through some shit. But now, he's passionate about giving back and helping others. Hope you guys enjoy this episode. And now, let's get into the show.
Welcome to Recovery Rockstars Uncut, uniting the recovery community with raw and real stories. Your host, Kevin Z, puts the light on people and brands that are rocking the recovery lifestyle. So you want to be a rock superstar? RecoveryRockstars.com. Now, here's Kevin.
Danny, what's up, brother? Welcome to the Recovery Rockstars Uncut podcast. How you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, man. How's Tulsa?
Tulsa's great. No complaints. Weather's beautiful for the last week or so. And so when the weather is like this, it's a treat. It does get very humid here, which is a definite shocker for a guy from LA to experience the first summer. But I don't know that I'll ever get used to it, but it's manageable. So right now it's beautiful. It's about 75 degrees. There's a breeze and there's sunshine. So I'll take what I can get and love it.
Perfect, man. Well, listen, I always like to start this podcast off on a positive note. And there's one thing that I saw on your Instagram that I'm curious about because you seem pretty stoked on it. The 11th Street Cleaner sign that you got. Was that yesterday or over the weekend?
Yeah, I mean, to unpack that it would take you an hour, but I'll give you the quick. Yeah. So I own the Outsiders House Museum, which is a house that was featured in the movie The Outsiders, filmed in 1982 here in Tulsa, Oklahoma. That's what brings me to Tulsa. And if you know the movie, the movie The Outsiders. If you remember a scene, it's right at the start of the movie where Pony Boy and Johnny Cade meet Dallas Winston on a corner, and they say, "What's up?" to him. They say, "We're early. What do you want to do?" He responds, "Nothing legal, man. Let's get out of here." They turn around. They start walking up the street. And as they start heading off up the street, their adventure begins, and it starts the movie, this way. And in the foreground, you see an 11th Street Cleaner sign. Sometime in the early 90s or late 80s, they tore that whole block. That whole block got demolished. When I first came to Oklahoma, to Tulsa in particular, to play Cain's Ballroom, I went looking for locations, and that I was able to figure out that 11th and Denver was where that corner was where they filmed. When I got there, it was an empty lot, but there was the 11th Street Cleaners. They had moved across the street to a standalone building, and the sign was still there in 2009. I came back in 2011. It was still here. And I think in 2012, they demolished that side of the block and the sign disappears. A couple of years later, it ends up on a place on 11th Street called Mantiques. And I wasn't living here at the time. And a friend of mine said, "Hey, I just saw that sign in an antique store for a couple $1,000. I'll go look this week and see if we can, get a deal." And this is before I bought the Outsiders House and turned it into a museum. And then like a week later, he goes, "Dude, I'm sorry, that sign's gone. They must have sold it." So I've been chasing the sign for a minute. Then I meet somebody else who ended up acquiring it and reselling it, but she wouldn't tell me who she resold it to. Then I met a neon guy who said, "Hey, I didn't know it was a secret. I know who has it because I fixed other signs of his." And then randomly yesterday, a few series of events, and it really ties into sobriety, which is crazy because I was going to an event yesterday that if I'm being 100% honest, had no real interest in going because it was an Easter egg hunt for a private community of kids. I don't have kids. It's Sunday. I like to relax and chill. But the gentleman who asked me to attend and his wife have done so much for me. I'm like, I told my missus on the way there, I'm like, usually I don't like to do this stuff. But I learned a long time ago that if I wanted to have friends, I have to be a friend. And these are the things you show up to when you're trying to be somebody's friend and you're reciprocating in that way. In the past, I was too cool for school. I wanted you to show up to my events, whether you loved them or not. But I don't know if I would always show up to your events. So I've changed that about myself. Mm-hmm. And in doing it, miraculous stuff happens. So I had a half hour to kill before I had to go to the Easter egg hunt. We went and get a slice of pizza, and then I went antiquing in a town called Broken Arrow to show my girl who just came here from LA a few of the spots right outside of Tulsa. I get in my car and I go down the block with all the antique stores and I bust a U-turn and I park. And as soon as I park, I look in the antique store window and there's the massive 11th Street Cleaner sign.
That's amazing.
I almost ran right through their window. As I get there, the lady was on the phone. It was closed. I tried to open the door, and she was like, "We're not open yet." And she motioned to me that, and then she was on the phone, and she looks at the price tag on the sign, and she's talking to someone. I go, "Oh my God, literally somebody's calling about it at that moment." Finally, she opens up the door. She says, "Can I help you?" I said, "Yeah, I'm here for that sign." She goes, "Were you just on the phone?" I'm like, "No." She's like, "That's crazy. Someone just called and wants me to hold that sign for them." I'm like, "Yeah, I don't know about all that." I'm like, "I'm here right now." She's like, "You are here right now. What do you want with it?" I told her I own the Outsiders house, et cetera, et cetera. She's like, "Oh my God, this is perfect." I told her the sign was seen there. And then I'm waiting for my buddy to show up with the truck because I have an old muscle car. I have a 1970 Roadrunner that I just got back. I just put a 440 in it and had all this work done to it. And as I go outside of the shop waiting for my buddy to come from another town with his truck to pick up the sign, there's a couple looking at my car. So I said, I looked over at him. I said, "Hey, it's a 1970. He goes, "Yeah, man, I thought so. What a great car." He was like, "Yeah." He was asking questions. We started talking, and then I told him I had a problem. I said, "I probably spend too much on stuff that I don't need to impress people that I don't know," you being one of them. And his wife said, "Yeah, you're talking to the right guy. My husband does the same," in so many words. And we were laughing. She goes, "Hey, while you're here, why don't you buy this sign?" I said, "That sign, I just bought that sign." She goes, "You're kidding me. That's our sign." I go, "What do you mean that's your sign?" And it was their sign. They didn't even know that that I had bought it and who I was. They were coming from brunch and having a few drinks, and they saw the car, and the husband said, "I have to pull over and see that car." And all of this crazy stuff just happened yesterday. And I want to tell you that it's not the first time, but it's equally as special as when a series of events just just so many things had to happen yesterday for that to happen. We were supposed to be open on a Sunday, amazing. But we decided to stay open because the guy who had the Easter egg thing is one of our volunteers. I was 50-50 if I was going to go to the Easter egg hunt or not, but I did do it anyway. And then if we didn't have a half hour to kill, I wouldn't have been on that block. When I get there, there's that sign in my mind. I've been looking for this sign for almost a decade. And then again, someone's trying to buy it off on the phone as I walk in. And then here's the sobriety part is if I wasn't sober, I wouldn't have the $3,000 that the sign cost available to me to do that. I would have been making a million frantic phone calls like, "You guys don't understand. There's a sign from this movie and it's really special. And can I just borrow $500, dude?" And, it just, all of these things had to happen. And then for the owner of the sign and his wife to be passing by at that exact time, to see my car, to pull over and then have this conversation. And he said to me, "Danny, I wasn't trying to sell that sign, but we're trying to lighten the load. We're thinking of retiring and we want to travel. My wife is telling me I have to let some of it go because I was never intending to let that sign go." And yesterday she talked me into it. And the owner of the store said, "Danny, originally she tried to put it in the back of the store." And I said, no, I insist you put it in the window. It'll do better. Had that sign been in the back of the store, I don't know that I would have saw it or would have went in there to find it. So I tell you this to tell you that God works in crazy ways. And I don't believe in any coincidences. These things are meant to happen. That being said, when they do happen, they are definitely miraculous and it's life-changing stuff because, when I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing, great things like this unfold in my life. And when I'm not doing what I'm supposed to be doing, even as something as simple as showing up for a friend, I don't get these kind of results. So it's a teachable moment. It shows me that, there is a force greater than me in the universe, and it always has been. And it's looking out for my best interest as long as I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. And I found that out by getting sober and getting in touch with that force, which I call God, and just doing the next indicated action. So now the Outsiders House Museum is the proud owner of a 11th Street cleaner sign seen in the Outsiders. It was an incredible day. So much so I felt hungover when I woke up from the emotions that were going through my head because it was so like
joy.
All my endorphins were firing off. Oh my God. I woke up with a headache this morning, literally, because I was just like, holy crap, what the hell just happened? It was great. So
see, that's amazing. All the millions of little things that had to fall into place in order to make that happen. And they did.
Know. Of all the people to park in front of that store that the day after they had just put that sign there. And it's me. I mean, I don't think anybody else is looking for that sign on the planet. Although it's an attractive sign and people like old vintage, neon signs. The neon is not there now, but those are people collect those things and people like those things. But of all the people to park in front of that store and see that neon sign, I'm still in awe and just like, wow,
That's amazing. Well, thank you for sharing that story. So, I think I connected with you after I watched that documentary, Kid 90. Did you watch it? What did you think of it?
Yeah, I did watch it. I thought it was brilliant. I was hesitant to watch it. I obviously knew I was going to be in it because I filmed a couple days worth of interviews with Soleil. I know the 90s were really, really good, and they were also really, really bad.
Yeah.
And I had a lot of stuff that I was like, man, I'm very open and honest. I don't see any reason not to be an open book, especially, that this part of my life it feels like bonus rounds. I've always kind of been, very, I always show people my cards for better or for worse, but you never know how someone's going to edit it. And I knew she was never going to, intentionally make me look bad, but there was, it's a lot of emotional stuff, and she had cameras around for a long time, and you just never know. So, and I don't like the sound of my own voice. I know people may be shocked. I don't ever read any press that I do. I never really look back. I might for a couple seconds and then go, I don't like the sound of it one bit. So I really wasn't going to watch Kid 90, or I was going to wait until the right time. She sent me an advanced link. I didn't watch it, but I ended up watching it with my girlfriend on Hulu on the premiere, and it was incredibly done. And she did a great job, basically putting in a nutshell, our relationship. But it's bigger than what I thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to be like a cutesy little Punky Brewster found her diary, and here's all these cool people. And it's way more deeper than that. And it's really cathartic to look back. And I was reading somebody's interview or comment about it today, but it really is like, you remember it one way, and then you have footage that shows it a different way, or even the same way, but with a little bit extra stuff. It's kind of surreal. And I almost wish that everybody had somebody with a camera following them so that you could get that introspection, or that step away from your life 20 years later and look at it and go, wow, there's some stuff I really like about it, and there's some stuff that I really don't like about it. But what a incredible piece of like history to be able to look at. And then the real takeaway is, one, I got emotional watching the end when all the people that had passed away were coming up on the screen, because I knew 90% of them, and there before the grace of God go I, because, and I'm not trying to sound melodramatic, but I'm telling you, even my own mother was betting against me as a young kid to make it to, 21. So to be here at 52, sober, almost 16 years in April, believe me when I tell you, like, that could have easily been me. There's seconds and inches for all of us that changed, everything. So
yeah, I can tell you, that took me on an emotional roller coaster. And at the very end where they were showing the names, I have to admit, man, I fucking started bawling. My wife was right next to me. I just started bawling because there were so many times she kind of went back, and unfortunately the people who ended their lives, I think of my best friend, and I always wish I would have known the depths of depression that he was going through. And, I wish I would have been able to been there and save his life. And it's just, I don't know, it just hit a chord with me, and I fucking lost my shit, man. I lost my shit.
I can only imagine. Soleil had a special bond with all of those people, clearly.
Yeah.
I've never really stopped to look back and count the people that I know that died that way, or just in general died tragically. There's one or two that were super close to me, and it's still that thing, but I'm too scared to look back. So It takes a brave soul and person to take that on. I don't even know how Soleil took that on, to be honest with you. I know how, because she's one of one. She's this bright, radiant force in the universe. She's never changed since I've known her. I can honestly tell you, I've never seen an episode of Punky Brewster, nor would I, because I'm too old for that. Like, I was already 5 years older than her or more.
Yeah.
And that's a long time when you're like going from like a seventh grader to somebody who would have been graduated from high school at that point. Those are your point of reference. I have a sister who's a couple of years younger than me, and I'm sure she likes Fast Times at Ridgemont High, but she probably likes Clueless better because it just was more relevant. And that was only a couple of years later that, the same people made Clueless that made Fast Times, but they were just two different high school experiences, but worlds apart, if you will. Yeah. So Punky Brewster, by the time that was on television, I was already out there running and gunning. Of course I knew it was a thing, but I didn't. So when I met Soleil, I just knew she was a child star, and she was cute. And at the time I was just like, she's a cutie. And she's like a little like sidekick. Like, she just rolls with the punches, and she just was authentically herself. And in LA in that time, she did for me what nobody could do for me, because I was like, this middle-class kid that all of a sudden, like overnight, we became like household names. And, we were like on MTV and on the radio every, 30 seconds. And a lot of fake friends came out of the woodworks, and a lot of old friends that were, that hadn't been around. It distorts your universe. And here I got somebody who was around us all the time, who was like my bestie at that point, who had been through all of the stuff I was about to go through, and was like this real calming force and this solid rock to like keep me balanced. It was like the true north. And, you know, later it developed into other things, but what a blessing she's been to say she's a friend. But it really takes a strong person to be able to go through your diaries 20 years later and go through all that footage and go through all of those messages, knowing a lot of people are no longer here, and knowing that life isn't just like this nice little package of like great memories from the 90s. I mean, it was like I don't have the fortitude or the wherewithal to even dig through old photos half the time. See, when I start going through them, it starts to trigger all kinds of even the good ones are problematic, because I don't want to. The stuff that happened for me 20 years ago feels like a movie I saw too. It doesn't really feel like my life, because what I do for a living and who I am today are two different people. You know what I mean? They're the same guy, but completely different. Like people tell me stories about back then, and I remember, but really I've blocked a lot of it out just for my own survival and for the sanity of my own, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
So she's the greatest. If there's like a handful of people you meet in your life and they've made a major impact, she's on the top of that list without a doubt. Without a doubt.
You could just see the love and affection you guys have for each other when you watch that documentary. It's pretty amazing.
And, you know, I hadn't talked to her in 20 years. I mean, so after I didn't, you know, when she started dating her future husband, that was it. I mean, we had dated prior to that. And when she met her new boyfriend, we went to the movies, me and Peter Green, the actor, with her. And I remember him going like, "Nice to meet you, and now fuck off," you know, and he didn't verbally say that, otherwise it would have been a fight. But the eyes said what I needed to. I already knew that. I would have said the same thing too, you know. He could clearly see that I was not a good force in his future love's life, you know what I mean? And so for the next 20 years, I don't see Soleil or hear from her at all. And it's a blessing, because I don't, you know, as I was going down a downward spiral, you pull the people closest to you with you, you know? So, and maybe that, you know, and I don't want to, you know, guess at anything in your life too, but I have to say it, because I'm thinking, you said, I wish I could do something to help somebody. Sometimes people they pull away so that they don't hurt you as well, even though you get hurt from the peripheral, the collateral damage, or but it's the lesser of things than to drag everybody down with you. You know what I mean? I don't know if that makes any sense, but to me it does.
I hear what you're saying.
The people I cared about, I pulled them down anyway, but there were certain people that I ran from as soon as I realized that this is a full-time prison that I'm in, which is a drug addiction, and then it's no longer recreational. I am addicted, and I don't know that I want to stop. I know I need to stop, but I'm going to ride this till the wheels fall off. And people who were too good for this world in general, plus too good for my life, they pulled away from me quickly. Soleil is one that I pulled away from, or maybe she pulled away from me as well, simultaneously, but thank God she did, because I would have only kept making life worse, because everybody around me at that time suffered, including me, to watch me do what I was doing, you know, which was slow suicide, you know, one day at a time through drugs. So,
well, let's talk about your journey, because, I mean, you've experienced something that 99.9% of the world hasn't, and that's, you know, fame and fortune and fucking fans and all that shit, which at the end of the day might be a little void, but I want to talk about your upbringing. So you were born in Brooklyn, but you moved to California in the 80s, and you grew up.
Yeah, I moved to California in the 70s. So I was born in Brooklyn, and 2 months after getting from the hospital to our apartment, we were evicted. My father went to prison for a decade. We had to move back in with my grandparents, who lived in Staten Island. The first three years of my life were idyllic, because grandparents always do it better than parents, right? They make up for all the mistakes they may have made with their kids. My mother worked late nights at the Chase Manhattan Bank, and so I would only see her as a passing person in my life. She might have been my older sister or my mom. My grandparents felt like my parents. I would see my mom on the weekends occasionally when she would be, you know, home. And then she got remarried, and we moved a couple miles down the street in the projects, really. It was Tyson Lane Projects in Staten Island. And she had a broken picker, if I do say so myself, because she won. You know, she had kids with my father, and then she had another kid with her next husband, who was also a full-blown alcoholic. And so it was rough growing up that way. But in the 70s in New York City, everybody in the projects, everybody looked like they were growing up that way. I mean, there was a lot of violence in the projects. There was a lot of violence in my apartment, in our household. They fought all the time. Maybe not all the time, but when you're young, it feels like if there's one or two a week, violent outbursts and ashtrays go flying across the room, or someone gets thrown against the wall or smacked up, it's traumatic. But I didn't know any different, you know. That guy ends up dying cirrhosis of the liver at 35. Even as a kid, I remember thinking that's young. When I was 35 and sober, I couldn't imagine how hard you would have to drink to get cirrhosis of the liver. But he accomplished that. And, you know, God bless him and God bless my father. They're both dead. And my father was murdered when I was 17, and my stepfather died of cirrhosis. They both really fell victim to the bottle. This is what alcoholics and addicts do with no program. Very few of them, you know, find a way out if they don't find a solution for their problem. That being said, we moved to California when I was 6 years old. Lucky for me, I had aunt and uncle they would take my sister, which is my half sister, and me every summer, and we would fly into New Jersey where they live. They moved out of Staten Island, New York to New Jersey. And then we would drive from New Jersey in a station wagon with their two kids to Springfield, Missouri, where my aunt was from. And we'd stay a couple of weeks on a farm, at their farm, and then we would drive back. And all the while we would stop at flea markets and thrift stores because they collected antiques, and particularly old school hand coffee grinders. And so as young kids, it was fantastic. We were sitting looking at opposing traffic on the back of a 1970 something, station wagon with the wood paneling, with our backs looking out the windows, telling truckers to honk their horn. We were staying at Holiday Inns back then, which were clean, nice, and beautiful hotels with pools. We were hitting all kinds of flea markets where, when you're my age, you know, back then we were after like comic books and Evel Knievel stunt cycles and World War II and Vietnam War relics. You know, you could buy literally carbine rifles with the pin sawed out for $12 back then. It was incredible. And so we were little road trippers and hunter-gatherers. And it really, I owe them an immense debt of gratitude, because I feel like I don't know if it was always in my DNA, but it was definitely brought to the forefront after going back and forth on those road trips every summer until I was about 14 or 15. And going back east until I was 13 or 14 every summer, it completely gave me a whole different perspective on life. And, I was coming from LA with Vans and OP shorts and Lightning Bolt and Town and Country shirts. And I was getting to New York and they were like, dude, are you from California? Older dudes clearly understood that I was from California, and young kids just thought I was from outer space. And then I would stay for the summer in the East Coast, and I would come back. You know, I'd bring them Oingo Boingo and Fishbone, and I would come back with Run DMC and Curtis Blow. And at the time, no radio stations in Southern California unless KDAY, which was the AM station that played hip-hop. You couldn't get that in the Valley, so no power stations were playing much hip-hop. So I was like a little wizard. I was learning all the stuff there was to learn about East Coast style and all the hip-hop stuff that was going on, and I was bringing them back to skateboard, surf, and punk culture that I was seeing in LA. And so I had a lot of good times, a lot of good adventures, and it shaped my life. But growing up in LA back then, you know, I'm not going to say it was difficult. It wasn't, but there was always culture shock. I always felt like I wasn't wanted at home. And I always felt that I was a New Yorker in my core that was pulled out of the East Coast to be in LA, where everybody seemed to have everything they had wanted. And we seemed to be lower middle class. We were at the lower end of the spectrum of people who were living where we lived. And as I say that, I think, what an asshole I'm saying this, but it's true. I mean, we were living in condominiums, but a lot of the people there, it was noticeable about 12 or 13 when people started getting Guess jeans and Lacoste shirts. And my mother's like, how much are those? $125 for those jeans in 1981 too. Yep. Nope. You know, people wearing Persol sunglasses, and Ray-Bans, and look, I'm rocking the Tigra. My mother's going go to Mervyn's and go get you some Tough Skins. And I was like, what? And so it sure happens to a lot of kids where you realize that we're not all getting the same amount of butter on our bread. And so I go see The Outsiders at 13, and it changed my life. And what I saw on that screen, looking back, I saw an experience similar to mine, except for it was in a 60s setting. But I was like, I'm living in a neighborhood where has a lot of latchkey kids, where kids are coming from broken homes or divorced parents, and they're living in the condominiums. And we're not poor kids by any means, but we're not rich kids either. We live within close proximity to people who were rich. Yeah. And so we kind of felt like the poorer of the kids. And, I seen that movie and I just thought these guys are cool as fuck. And if this is the best life ever gets, I'll be okay with that, because all I ever really wanted was to be accepted within a group of people. I try to make that nuclear family that wasn't there out on the streets. And I know that that's the first why I loved hip hop so much, because one, it was from New York. Two, because it was always group involved. If you were breaking or writing graffiti or rapping, it was always a crew. It was always like a posse, a crew or whatever. And I like that concept. Unlike rock and roll, where if you're a guitar player, you're in your room for 8 hours a day, working on your arpeggios and your hammer-ons. It's like, it's a solo thing in my mind, where hip hop was like an inclusive, like everybody get down and do your thing. So I love that vibe. I always liked, and then the downside of that is gangs and that kind of shit as well. Yeah. But that's what we did, and that's what I did. And so never in a million years did I think I'd be living in Tulsa doing what I'm doing. But 13, 14, not really doing much. 7th grade, 8th grade, it's just like every other kid. But there were nightclubs that were popping up all over Southern California, and they were teen nightclubs, meaning they didn't have a bar at all. They had juice bars, but everybody was getting drunk in the parking lots, and we were going into nightclubs. It was a big phenomenon in Southern California at the time. There's a handful of them that are notable: Phases and 321 in Santa Monica, and Dillon's in Westwood, and there's one off of Beverly Boulevard, and I'm thinking the name of it. But there were a handful of them. It was a rite of passage for everybody who was coming up in the 80s to go to these. And it was a bunch of new wave music mixed with like what I would call freestyle music, which is like Debbie Deb and Trinier. It was a little bit of dance music, but it was still the new wave era was still in full swing. So we were dressing wild back then and doing our thing. And that's where I first drank. Yeah, that's right. I drank a few times before that, but I got that first drunk that was notable, and it worked. And I'm going to tell you, I was probably 15 and a half. I drank vodka and orange juice, and I had drank before with no good results and didn't understand why anybody did it. But this night I had a few big pulls off of a mixed screwdriver that we were mixing in the parking lot. And I went in that club that night, and the music all of a sudden sounded like the best song I'd ever heard in my life. My clothes starting to feel a little looser on me. I started to not only dance, but try to dance to girls or at girls and started actually talking to girls. And, for the first time in my life, I was like, oh my God, now I understand why people drink. Yeah. And I remember thinking, I never want to go through life. I don't want to go through one more moment of life not feeling like this. I had finally found the thing that would fix me, because I always felt separate and apart. I always felt less than. A lot of that I picked up at home, unfortunately. And I think even if you don't get that at home, I know a lot of kids that had full, functional families, mom and dad, and were doted on and still have, needles in their arms. So it's not a byproduct of that, but I'm just telling you my story. My story is I always felt that I didn't fit in. I wasn't good enough. And no matter what I did, I was going to fail at. So when I had a few drinks, all of that kind of just disappeared. I felt confident. I felt outgoing. I wasn't intimidated by anybody. I got in a lot of fights drinking, and it was almost a fun thing. I was getting respect and getting people were in fear of me, and fear is a powerful tool when you're in your teens to wield. Yeah. And I'm tall and lanky, but I can throw these things. And so people started to, say my name a lot. I was, and even before House of Pain in the valley where I grew up in San Fernando Valley, you love me or hate me, you knew who I was, because I was out there, and I was we were making noise in our teens without a doubt, and for the wrong reasons too, and drinking was a companion from that point on. I never went out. I didn't drink every day, but every time I went out, I drank. And I'd go to high school. I just hung out. I stopped going inside, and we would day drink in the parking lot across from the high school, where all the kids kind of hung out on this embankment that they used to skateboard on. And nobody said a word to us. We'd go right in this thing and hang out all day and drink a few. And we'd go to other places, go to the mall, wherever, and we'd come back to the school after. So drinking was my best friend from about 15 and a half until I got sober. I want to tell you that in high school, I had no real plan. I was starting to, I saw Scarface as well in the 80s, and I misunderstood that it was I thought it was a documentary. I didn't know that it was just a movie. And I thought it looked to me like a functional blueprint for a guy who doesn't feel like he's got much going on, and doesn't want to really work hard for money and is also like scared of life. Selling drugs seemed like a really good way to get rich quick and not have to do much. And it wasn't frowned upon in the hip hop world, I can assure you that. And I had a few people who knew where to get that stuff. And so I was looking back at, it wasn't a large amounts, but I was definitely selling cocaine in my teen years. And I was doing a lot of credit card theft, which is a whole other thing. But we used to be able to reprogram the strips on the back. I had somebody who could do that for us. And we were doing I was always up to no good, let's just say that. And when normal people were getting an education and figuring out what they were going to do with their lives, I was not doing anything constructive. I was out there doing stupid shit, illegal shit, criminal shit, and shit that all come back to bite me in the ass in more ways than one. Yeah. And so the consequences and the repercussions from living that way, unfortunately for me, and I say this with all due respect, I didn't pay the price until a decade after doing all of those things. And the reason I didn't pay a price is because I started a band around the time I'm 19 or 20 called House of Pain. And that band, me and Everlast got together. We knew each other. We grew up in the same neighborhood. We kind of went to the same schools at different times. But he was one of the handful of white guys in that era back then that were like official with the hip hop. And in that world, I would see him at spots, where we were one of 5 white guys in there in a spot with nothing but Bloods and Crips and B-boys. And so I knew he was an MC and I knew he was good at it. And I was a fan of his first record. And so I feel like I had the other part to that, which was the style and the logos and the gang and the whole. And so we put we put those two things together with the help from other people, and House of Pain is born. Why I offer that up is because it saves me from the jails, the institution, and the death that awaits any addict alcoholic. At that time, I was not using drugs. I was selling drugs. And, I didn't sell for forever, and I didn't sell full-time all the time. But I was definitely in and out of that world. And then music saves me. And it's an incredible. I have this, we end up putting out a record, and it goes platinum. And we had the biggest hit single on the planet at the time. And we all become overnight, MTV darlings for that summer, and getting flown all over the planet. And, my life changes, and drinking goes hand in hand with that. We're Irish and we're expected to drink at this point, Yeah. And all of the crazy stuff that I did in my teens is all like proof positive on the records and on the interviews that we're doing, that we're like, our bona fides are there. We're not just like, like whiny little white guys that are, not real with it. And so,
well, it's crazy because you found that family that you were searching for with, House of Pain, but how did you process that immediate fame? I mean,
you don't process it. For me, what happened was, it was like I finally was able to fill that God-shaped hole. That inadequacy thing started to get filled, because if everybody's telling me, I started having panic attacks, which I'd never had in my life before House of Pain. Right before that record came out, everybody had heard the single in my circle, and everybody was telling me, you're going to be famous. You're going to be this is going to be the biggest single. You guys are going to be famous. And imagine your whole life thinking to yourself, you ain't going to be shit. You're going to go to prison. You're going to be dead or in fucking prison, like your mother keeps telling you, by the time you're 21. And then all of a sudden, everybody you come into contact with is like treating you better, treating you good, telling you you're going to be famous, doing things for you abnormally that they wouldn't even do when you were best friends with them years prior, and it's hard to explain how that feels. It feels like Twilight Zone. So much so that I started to have panic attacks that something was wrong. And I just kept drinking through it. I just kept drinking and drinking and drinking. And the monetary gains that we got from that was life-changing, because now I could afford the cars that I always wanted. Now I could afford the clothes and the home and the outside shit, always thinking that was my big problem in life. If I just had the outside shit, my life would be great. And then you get the outside shit, and guess what? Your life is great. It's fucking great for about a week or 3 or a month or 5. Yeah. But eventually, dude, you're still going to go, well, I got all that shit, and she broke up with me anyway. What? Like, I'm the guy. And I'm driving that, and I live here. What do you mean you're breaking? You can't break up. I'm the guy. You don't. What? And so life's still life, and no matter what you get, you're still, you're not. It doesn't make you immune from the human condition. And my whole life, it's all I was trying to do was avoid the human condition. Yeah. Any real responsibility and any real pain. Who wants to feel or do those things? Maybe people do. I don't. So. The outside stuff did not fix me. It's great. You know, there's an old saying, one of the presidents said, you know, I've been rich and I've been poor, and rich is better. Yeah, you have a lot more options when you have a lot of cash to do things, but it is not a fix, especially if the problem with you is just not monetarily, and it's an inside job. And that I learned through working, you know, a 12-step program. And no matter where I was there, you know, no matter where I went, there I was, and I'm the problem. And what I'm thinking and what I'm seeing and how I process those things is the problem, because my lenses are skewed. And so what I see and what is reality are two different things. When you get that kind of fame and you're young and you're immature and you get that kind of money, and people who are also immature treating you, they're throwing themselves at you, women in particular. But even guys were like, dudes that you kind of were dicks in the past were like, all of a sudden, come over, hang out. Like, we're having a party. We'd love you to come. Like, whoa.
Come over, bro.
It just, yeah, you know, it changes everything, because you're like, dude, this guy used to be a dick to me, and now he's like fucking acting. It's a weird thing to happen. And I didn't have anybody to lean on that could tell me anything. So I'm my own worst enemy when it comes to like making good, healthy choices. And so, you know, you make it through as you make it through. And that's why I think when you're looking at Kid 90 and that kind of thing, it's no wonder that kids, when they're young, when they're getting that kind of fame and bigger in their adolescent years, even before their teens and the young teens, it's got to destroy your mind, really, because by the time you get to be in your 20s, you're like, this is not what I thought my life was going to be. I think about that when I used to see like the Two Corys, that TV show a couple years back, where like Corey Haim, like, you know, all signs pointed that he was going to be the next Johnny Depp or the next, you know, whoever. And then he gets to his 20s, mid 20s, and nobody even could be bothered with it. And how do you live that down? And how do you live the expectations down? And so drugs provide a really good escape vehicle for the mental and the soul sucking condition, or the spiritual bankruptcy. And this is all shit. If you told me in my 20s about spirituality and bankruptcy and inside jobs, I'd tell you to go screw, because it doesn't make sense to me. Only thing that makes sense to me is money and pride and prestige. Yeah, chasing chicks and buying shit. And so it took years for me to grab to these concepts. But eventually, when you go as low as I go and went and had to go, you'll try anything rather than go back to that place. And so it all comes falling apart for me at the end of the 90s. When I really just did the math recently, probably after Kid 90, I was like, you know what? House of Pain really lasted from like 92 to like 80. I mean, 92 to 98 technically, but by 96, it was already like, we already knew it was like it just wasn't, the vibe was gone. We weren't getting along. The writing was on the wall. And so 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, it was like a 5-year run, dude. Yeah. But for so many years, I based everything, my whole value was based on a 5-year fucking period of my life, which is unfair to me. It's unfair to, you know, it recently just dawned on me that I judge everything through this lens of like that 5-year period. And that's ridiculous. That was just like one chapter of like a many different stories and things. And it took me so long to just like put all that in perspective. And so by the end of the 90s, it all came falling down. Eric left the band unannounced, you know, to us, unknown to us. There was no like, we felt that it was falling apart, but he didn't say, hey, I'm going to quit this band, so we're going to go on one more run and make sure everybody's money's. In my mind, is what I'm trying to tell you. I wish he would have said, hey, I'm done with this thing, so let's just make one more hurrah, a finale tour, and get as much money off the table as we can. And from there, I wish you all luck, and let's all be friends. But I have solo aspirations that I'd like to chase. Instead, he basically was like, this band sucks, and I'm fucking out of here. And he blamed me for being a drug addict. But the truth is, I had just started dabbling at that time as a reaction of losing most of spending most of the money that we had made, and him not being able to tour because he had gun charges and he couldn't leave his house for a year on house arrest, and took another year off. And while he's taking years off, we're all spending like it's going out of style, and we can't keep up the lifestyle. So everybody's pointing fingers at everybody. The band breaks up. He goes on to sell millions and gets a Grammy and writes another hit song. Lethal goes to Limp Bizkit, and they start getting Grammys and millions of dollars. And I find myself in a pity party that lasts, another 4 or 5 years of a downward spiral. At this point, I find methamphetamines, and it did for me what that first drink at Phases, that nightclub, did for me. It was life-changing. At first, it was fun. Then it was fun with problems, and then it just became problems. In all of that, I joined an outlaw bike club. I was in House of Pain when I was in that club as well. I was also then selling again to keep my habit up. And I was out there taking penitentiary chances as this, as a secondary act to, while these guys are on the road enjoying a whole new career that was even bigger than House of Pain. Both Limp Bizkit and Everett solo stuff did bigger numbers. And so that made me feel like shit too. It really, I'm looking back with the grown up eyes. I mean, what their shit has nothing to do with me. It really doesn't. And I was super happy in my heart for them, but I also felt like shit about myself because I was like, well, how come something miraculous like that or something great isn't happening? They work for it too. And I'm never take any of that away from either of those dudes. But at the end of the day, you could understand how when it's all falling apart and you're grabbing for straws, it's everybody else's fault and problem. And so I had a lot of work to do by the time I get sober. So in 2000, I get sober. I was really out of options anyway. It wasn't like I had other options for other things. I was in a dysfunctional relationship, had no money coming in whatsoever, and codependent on that person to really float me through life. It was getting old quick, and I was sick and tired of being sick and tired. And so I ran into an old buddy. I knew him to be sober. I go to a couple meetings with him. I hear laughter for the first time, and I'm hooked. And I'm like, this is not terrible. I thought this was going to suck. And I forget to tell people I went to rehab somewhere along that House of Pain career when I first started dabbling in drugs because the word got out that I was doing coke, and it was like frowned upon in hip hop, and it was frowned upon in our social circles. So I did a little 21-day dry out at a rehab just to get people off my ass, but still not believing I had a problem with drugs because it really wasn't yet. And then I found methamphetamines, and that quickly became a problem. So I get sober in 2000. I find a 12-step program. I started collecting days turn into months turn into year, 2 years. Let's just say this. Year one, I do all my 12 steps. I love my new life. Everything starts to like come back around. The friends that were like cut me off and were done with me were like so impressed and so happy to see me thriving. I get a solo record deal. They give me $500,000 up on the front end of it. Year two, the record's done, but the it's getting held up because the label's falling apart. My ego's coming back immediately too, because you give me $500,000 in a record deal, and I start to think, shit, this is all I doing again. It's how cool I am. By year three, all the money that I made in year one and two are not only gone, but now I'm starting to feel bad again. I'm not working the program anymore. I'm only going to the cool guy meetings where there might be chicks or job opportunities for me. Not that I was going to do any work, but where there was any kind of, I was only in it for me. And at year three, I decided, you know what, maybe I didn't have a drinking problem. I clearly had a drug problem, but why can't I just have a drink? I've been a good boy for 3 years. So I decided I'd go out and have a drink, swearing to myself I'd never go back to drugs because drugs destroyed me. I want to tell you I successfully drank for about 72 hours before I was right back on methamphetamines. Wow. And that launched another 3-year downward spiral to the point where I ended up living in somebody's warehouse with very little teeth in my mouth, a warrant for my arrest. My car went to impound, and I was too high to go pick it up and scared that there was drugs in it so that they were going to arrest me. I had a suspended driver's license. The girl that was the codependency girl was like, go fuck yourself. And I mean, everybody had just walked from me, and I was as sick as I could be. And I thought I would never be able to get sober again. I tried to come back and forth in the program, and I just couldn't hear the message anymore. And then one day somebody hit me up and said, hey, I'm in Hollywood. If you ever want to go to a meeting, let me know. And I'm like, man, this is perfect timing, because I was literally, I was suicidal at this point. And I went to this meeting, and I don't know why it was different from the other ones that I went to, but this time I just was like, God, I did that prayer, God help me. And I did that prayer a million times. So it's not like that prayer is a magic trick neither. But I said, God help me. I don't want my old life back. And I think I don't even think, I know. When I first got sober, the secret was that, I would be sober and God would give me back that old House of Pain lifestyle. And that was never going to happen. And although I did get a solo deal for a rap record that I made and made a lot of money off that for the anticipation that, so I got sober the first time so I could get the outside stuff back. This time I was like, God, I don't care about any of that stuff. I just want a chance at a decent life. And I don't want the old life back. I want a new life where it's very simple and very manageable. And so I got my opportunity, and I met a guy immediately and said, who's your sponsor? And I said, I don't know. I don't have one. He said, do you want one? I said, yeah. He goes, are you willing to go to any length? I said, absolutely. And he said, call me 3 times this week. Here's my number. And if I don't pick up, don't take it personal. Just call me 3 times. And I called that 3 times, and I almost missed out. The last day I almost forgot, and I called him. Then I see him in a meeting. He goes, man, 99% of the people I tell to do that don't follow through. And so it makes it really easy for me. I offer my services. They don't follow through, and I'm off the hook, because who wants to do who wants to be a sponsor? Some people love it. But this guy was like, you know what? I'm glad that you were willing. Let's get into the steps immediately. And I started to do my steps, and I started to live the program, and life got better quick. And I want to tell you that for a decade, it was up, down, and all around. I made a lot of money the first 3 years, and then had a business partnership blow up right in my face from another dude that was in the program too, or sober at least. He wasn't really in the program. He was sober a little longer than I was. And it ended nastily in court proceedings and all kinds of shit. I fell in love a few times and had my heart broken a few times. I got married for a decade. I was, married. Life on life's terms is not always beautiful, and sometimes it's ugly, but it was mostly beautiful, the 10 years sobriety. When I got to 10 years sobriety, I kind of hit a wall. I was like, man, I'm sober 10 years. I couldn't imagine getting 10 hours back in the day, much less 10 weeks. 10 months was like the impossible. 10 years for a guy like me? Are you kidding me? But my next thought was like, where's my shit? Like 10 years, bro? Like you don't have a 4-bedroom house with 2 kids and 3 cars, and they're not calling you Mr. O'Connor by now. Where's your shit? And I was like, I was in that weird place where, like, again, I started to think it was about the outside shit again, And I thought that because I was collecting years somehow that I was owed some outside shit. And I had to really work through all that stuff. When I say work through it, I mean, I had to start breaking it down again, like remembering to myself that like the deal was that if all I got out of sobriety was sobriety, that it had to be enough. And then I couldn't go like, well, if I don't get this, that, and the third, it's a deal breaker, because those things come and those things go. And none of that's promised. There is a thing in the program, and it's called The Promises. And it said, we will enjoy a new way of life. And the goal is to be happy, joyous, and free. And my primary purpose today, it saves my ass every day, because I know no matter if I find a beautiful sign that I've looking for a decade that needs to be in my museum, or the day sucks and all kinds of outside shit happens to me, both of those days are the same. My primary purpose never changes. And my primary purpose as a recovered alcoholic and addict is to trust God, clean house, and be of service. That's it. So if I trust God and I clean house, which is a metaphor for, making sure that I'm like in the center of this thing, doing the work, and I trust that God has a plan for me, and I just keep showing up, then that's a win for me. There are no losses if I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing in my primary purpose. If I get the girl, I don't get the girl. If I get the car, I don't get the car. I get the job, I don't. Whatever the thing is, it's irrelevant to my primary purpose. And I had to learn that the hard way. And it's not that it's a hard concept to grasp. It's just when you really have to buy in 100%. There's no 99% of any of these. Same with one day at a time. It was a slogan for years. It didn't make any sense to me. It totally is everything to me now. It's like, dude, today is one day. It's like, it doesn't have nothing to do with yesterday and nothing to do with tomorrow. If it's great, unfortunately, this too shall pass. If it sucks, good news, this too shall pass. And I just show up every day, and I do the footwork, and I stay connected and doing what we're doing right now. Again, it's like going to the Easter egg hunt. It's not that I don't want to do this thing, but I always say, yeah, I want to do it. And then a couple hours before, I'm like, shit, I got to do this thing at 7. Okay, honey, go to the post office real quick, walk the dog so I don't, it's like I panic, and my instinct is to run. And in the past, that's what I did. I didn't look, when I look back, I realized I was a runner, and that was shaming. I was ashamed of that fact, because in my mind, I'm a tough guy. And I'm like, dude, every time you got up to a place where you felt a little uncomfortability, you either got somebody to do the work for you, you ran from the work or the thing or the situation, or you just, you made some excuse why you couldn't do it. And I don't do that anymore. And again, yesterday was proof positive. When you do even the stuff you don't particularly want to do, like show up to an Easter egg hunt all the way on the other side of town, miraculous shit just seems to happen by doing what you're supposed to be doing. All of those things that I told you that led up to that sign, if one of them are off, it's just like, it doesn't happen. It just doesn't happen. And so my only part in play that I have to play is to take the steps. And that's mentally, physically, and metaphorically, and in reality. I just do one step at a time, one foot in front of the other. And I found a beautiful life within those, in that philosophy and in this program. And my job now is just to, again, carry this message. So.
Yeah, and you are caring, and I appreciate you being on the podcast because there's so many things that you have said on this that is going to resonate with somebody who is struggling or a loved one, and it's going to help save a life. So you're paying it forward, brother. Tell me, for somebody who is listening right now that might be struggling, what would be your biggest piece of advice for them?
I mean, the simplest advice, the best advice, and the most simplest advice I ever heard in sobriety was go where the love is. And for years, I was always trying to go where I thought I would be loved, and I would just make them love me. And if I could just be this or act like that, they would love me. And I don't force that anymore. I go where the love is, and you know where the love is when you're feeling it. And that for me is it. And then again, another great piece of advice, and I'll give you the elevator pitch on all of this stuff. We were talking about the silly sign that's means so much to me, and it means so much to Tulsa. But at the 10-year mark, I was like, dude, where's my career? Like, I had done a few different. We put House of Pain back together in that 10 years of my sobriety. We put another group, La Coca Nostra, together during my sobriety, and those were starting to fall apart as well for different reasons. Just because the type of hip hop we do is like not the kind of hip hop that young fans are doing. It's like we do a certain brand of like that boom bap shit, but if you're coming to our shows, you're our age, and people our age are just not the hip hop kind of, they kick out at a certain age. And it was just starting to get stale. And I say that with all due respect. Like, just in that moment, I was like, dude, there's not a lot of shows lined up. The groups are starting to fizzle out in this moment. What am I going to do? And I had a friend of mine say, dude, if you just knew God's plan for you. And then you don't want to hear that. I don't want to hear that, because that feels like I'm at the mercy of and I am, but of waiting for the universe and God to just anoint something to me. So I'm always responsible for the footwork. But it was in that moment where I was like, well, dude, I don't know what I want to do. But I know I don't want to work a full-time job for somebody else. And that's when I started to look at my options. And that's when I started to think about that Outsiders House thing. And I did a lot of urban exploring, and we were trying to put a little TV show together, and everybody kept asking about the Outsiders House and how I found it and what was the state of it now and what was going on with it. And I always wondered about it. So I started making drives from Beverly Hills in a cop car that I bought. I bought a blacked out undercover cop car, and I would take it to Tulsa, halfway across the U.S., and I would always make these visits and these road trips. And before long, I started to think, well, what if you do something with this house? Because nobody else seems to be doing something. What if you turn it into a museum? And at the time, I had very little money and zero plan and no experience on how to do any of this stuff. And you asked what I would tell somebody that's struggling. It's like, dude, fuck what you think, because that's a lot of the times what got us here. And what I thought I knew turned out to be bullshit anyway. I now, and I'm not bragging, I'm just telling you how this crazy shit worked. I didn't know what I was going to do for a second act after House of Pain. And by the time I was thinking about a second act, I should have already been in my fifth act. Okay. Mm-hmm. So that's how far behind life I was. Mm-hmm. I find this house, I buy it with the last amount of money I had to my name. I literally had like $8,000 of my name left with no work in front of me and no potential to make any new money. I was in it for $20,000, which is a steal, but at the time it was like I was all in, and the house was a complete teardown. I started GoFundMe, and I started doing what I used to do in hip hop, which is hype man and rally, and I started to rally support for this thing. And I want to tell you, in 3 years, from everybody from the author S.E. Hinton of The Outsiders donated $35,000 all in. Jack White from the White Stripes gave us $30,000. Billy Idol gave us $1,000. And the people who championed it the best were like local people who were like, hey, after soccer practice on Sunday, I'm a lawn guy, and I'll come over with my daughter and we'll cut your lawn. Or I fix roofs. I'll come and fix your roof for you. You have leaks all over, but my company can do that for you. And it still happens to this today. I live here full-time in Tulsa, Oklahoma as the gatekeeper at the Outsiders House Museum. And it's turned into this beautiful little thing, man. And, COVID took a big bite out of us as well. We've been closed for over a year like everybody, most people else, because we're public, we're a place where large numbers would gather. But slowly we've been opening up again. The future is bright here. But if you would have asked me early sobriety, like if this was a possibility, or if I saw myself living anywhere else except for Los Angeles and doing what I'm doing, or you would have told the 13-year-old me that I'd be that house in that movie that you love so much, you're going to own that, and you're going to you're going to spend 5 years collecting everything that, bears the resemblance of The Outsiders. We have the largest collection of memorabilia and movie-worn wardrobe on the planet. And now I'm trying to figure out how I can do an S.E. Hinton museum and include Rumblefish text and a few other of her books, and make a completely, encompassing museum homage to my favorite authors, S.E. Hinton. So I guess what I'm saying is what I thought my life was going to look like and what my life looks like are completely two different things. But it's the best thing that ever happened for me, because the things that I thought I wanted were like, they weren't it. And I got a lot of those things and they still didn't do anything for me. And what I found at the end of the day is that if you stay sober long enough, you'll find it in your heart that you've been overpaid and it's time to give back. If you're anything like me, I should have been giving back a lot sooner than I did. And what I mean by that is in my time and in my effort. And I look for now opportunities where I used to run from those, and that's where I could be of service, and that's where I could bring the light. If there's no light, I be the light. You know what I mean? And as corny as that sounds, it's true. I look for places where I could be of service, and sometimes it's just as simple as showing up to a meeting from people new, and they look around, they see a familiar face, they go, "Oh, there's Danny. There's this one. There's that one. Cool. I'm in the right spot." Yeah. You don't even know you're being of service. I don't even know I'm being of service half the time, just by when I show up to places where I say I'm going to show up. I try to show up on time, and I try to leave a little later than I'm expected to stay. And I try to ask if I could be of service, or I just do what the next indicated thing is. And that's been a change for me. That's not me telling you how cool I am or bragging on it. That's how I get nourished. It's the craziest concept. In order to keep it, I got to give it away. Yeah. And this is how this thing works. If you're in the 12-step program, and it's worked for me, and it always worked for me. It was me that stopped working the program when it fell apart the first time. And this time, I don't put anything in front of it, because everything I put in front of it, I lose. So.
Yeah, I love hearing your passion about the Outsiders House and giving back to others. Just curious, which personal achievement in your life are you most proud of?
I mean, besides getting up during the podcasting, turning on the lights, that's an impressive one. Sorry, I couldn't see. I was in the dark.
I'm not going to tell that. That was awesome.
Like, that was pretty impressive, man. I got to buy the clapper next time and get that going. You know what? It's not a one thing, because they're all super cool. In my mind, I'm like, I believed in the whole I'll be dead or in prison by the time I'm 21. So it was always icing on the cake no matter what, because I had low expectations for my life. So I've exceeded those a long time ago for what I thought I was going to experience in life. Finding that neon yesterday was miraculous. I always, in my mind, ask God for signs. There's my sign. I mean, it was like, if that doesn't hit you right across the face after like wanting signs, there's my sign that I'm on the right track. They're all to me every day that I'm here in the moment, sober, doing what I love to do. They're all victories. I truly believe in a lot of those coffee cup or, bumper sticker mottos or quotes. And literally it's either a win or a lesson. There's no losing in this thing anymore. And if I look at it like that, everything becomes like, that sucked. That was painful. There's a lesson in there for you. What's that lesson? The lesson is to expect the speed bumps, expect to, sometimes it's not going to go your way, expect to have falling outs, expect to have disagreements. But what can I learn? I can learn to be better in those moments. I can learn to just accept that life on life's terms sometimes looks like this, to know that these things pass. These are tools that I learned through the work in the 12 steps. They're all included in the 12 steps. And prior to this, I just dealt with everything by either like running from it or putting my fist through it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or threatening to put my fist through it. I was either going to like knock you out the box, or I'm like, fuck you. I can't deal with this shit. And I'd walk and I'd just blame everybody else for my problems. I'm not a victim of anything anymore. I'm responsible for my side of the street and my side of the street only. And when it's clean on my side of the street, everything else is really, you're entitled to your opinion. The world's entitled to do this. Things go the way that things go. But when my side of the street is clean, I know I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. I start every morning with a prayer, a gratitude list. I write down 5 things that I'm grateful for. I share it with about 15 to 20 other people. And I try to do meditation. I'm not great at the meditation. I try to quiet my mind. It's not easy. It's hard when you're over. I get paid for my imagination, or everything I've done has been something that I've dreamed up and then and manifested into the world. So I have a very overactive imagination. It's very hard, especially if it's been banged out with 4 or 5 espressos. And then I'm like, now let me sit and try to quiet my mind. But it's an ideal. I don't fail to do the gratitude list, even if I have to do it almost before midnight. And right now, today is one of those days. After yesterday was so crazy that I woke up, I couldn't even think straight. So I still have a gratitude list due to the people that I share my list with. And I always pray, and I pray sometimes throughout the day. I don't know who I'm praying to, man. It's not Jesus, it's not Buddha, but it's not them either. It's just, I'm just praying to the good, the higher power and the good force in the universe. And it's that simple, man. I don't question it. My buddy said, open your watch and let's show me how that works. I'm like, what are you talking about? Because how the fuck are we going to understand how God works? Like, just trust that it works and keep on pushing. And I do. I trust that something out there, there's something to all of this and that there's no coincidences. And yesterday was a complete textbook proof positive that there is no coincidences, and that what's meant for you won't miss you if you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. Sometimes even if you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing. But in my life experience, every time I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing, I get great results. And these things seem to happen a lot more than when I'm not doing what I'm supposed to be doing. So
love it, Danny. One more question for you, because I know you got a lot of cool possessions. Which one of your possessions holds the most sentimental value to you?
There's not a perfect answer for that, but I can tell you that when I bought the Outsiders House Museum, it was just a house, and it was the movie was filmed in that house. So I'm like, I'm going to make a museum. So I started raising money for the museum. And then I go, what am I going to put in this museum? I have one poster. And so I'm a great collector. I started off collecting, like as kids, we collected maybe comic books or baseball cards. Getting into hip hop early, it was literally you were a scavenger hunter, because you couldn't go on the internet and find fat laces and name belt buckles and purple Pumas and Kangles. Where the fuck are you going to get a Kangle at 14 in Sherman Oaks, California? You're not. You're going to have to drive out to this Lawson swap meet and get busy and man up and go in there and get you something. And so I'm a good hunter-gatherer and a collector. So I started collecting. And in that collection, there are so many impressive pieces, and the universe really provided. But out of all of those pieces, nothing in my mind tops having Dallas Winston, who was played by Matt Dillon, the hero's leather jacket. So the one that he wore and favored, there was a few of them, but the one that he wore and favored ended up in S.E. Hinton, the author's collection. And when I did the museum and I had a few meetings with her at restaurants, she finally said, come over to my house. I've got some paper material I'd love to give you. I was looking for call sheets. And she says, I got some, kid. Come by and I'll give you what I got. And as we were sitting there looking through the paper material, she goes, hold on a second. She comes out of the bedroom with the leather jacket that Matt Dillon wore in The Outsiders. She says, I just happen to have this, which is is this something you'd be interested in having? And I was sitting down, thank God, because I would have fainted. And I was like, oh my, are you kidding me? So, I mean, it doesn't get better than that. As a kid, when I saw The Outsiders, I mean, I've said it a million times at this point, but I wanted to be Matt Dillon so bad it hurt. That Dallas Winston, Matt Dillon character was like the big brother I always wished I had, or the guy I wanted to be. At 13, I thought at 16, I hope I could be something as cool as that guy. And so to have his leather jacket, it was like, and from the author, how do you top that? But there are many different, every piece that we've collected has a crazy story like that. But if there's a fire and I got to grab one, I'm grabbing that first. I'll just leave you with that. So
nice. Actually, I am curious to go back to the House of Pain days. Who was your favorite band to tour with?
Cypress Hill for sure. I mean, we were inseparable back then. The Soul Assassins, and those tours were all sold out, and it was everything that one would imagine or dream that a hip hop show and experience would be like. I mean, we were at the top of the food chain in the early 90s as far as Cypress and House of Pain coming out of LA with that New York style and their weed thing and our Irish thing. And it was like, it was ridiculous. And all the legacy acts that we grew up idolizing were coming to our shows, like bowing and tipping their cats to us as, like, these motherfuckers are all official. So there's nothing that beats that. We toured with a lot of great bands. We brought Rage Against the Machine out on their first tour. We brought a lot of, we usually paired with punk and metal acts just to shuffle the deck a little bit, but none of those compete with, I mean, the Rage one was incredible too, because you're watching a group that just releases a record and they're not really known outside of LA. And within 2 weeks, the whole world finds out who they are by listening to that record and seeing their live show. And within 2 weeks, they were blowing us off the headlining. I mean, they might have, we should have just graciously said, fuck it, it's your tour now, take over, because it's too powerful. You can't compete with the DAT machine, a DJ and 2 MCs, or 1 MC and a hype man even, with Rage Against the Machine live. I mean, who can compete with that? Yeah, but and that was a great, that was a great run. but that wasn't, that was a short run and whatever. They went on to way greater heights. But at that point, everything we did, us in Cypress, it was like being with family. And we had a big old bunch of tour buses filled with like friends, family. And we basically brought, our section of LA to the world. And those were great times. So
nice,
nothing beats that.
And before we go here, any other words of wisdom that you wanted to share?
Yeah, don't drink and you won't get drunk. That's what they told me when I first got there. They're like, pull the cotton out of your ears and put it in your mouth, and don't drink and you won't get drunk. Problem solved, my friend. But yeah, listen, I all of this stuff was foreign to me when I first started, but I was willing. And if you're struggling with this stuff, the prayer I said was, God, please help me. And I found a 12-step program. And the only thing that's required in that program, and this is not me guessing or it says it, it's willingness is the key. And as long as you're willing to do it in a way that's suggested, instead of imagining everything can go wrong, imagine all the things that could go right. And I've always remained willing and teachable. And that comes with humility. And I had to get it beaten into me because I spent years before I was willing to get to that state, and hopefully you don't have to go that far. But yeah, there is help if you want it out there, and you just got to ask for it. So nice, with that, I will leave you with that's the best I got for tonight, guys. And it was great talking to you. And
Danny, much appreciated. You guys check out Danny, check out the Outsider House. How can people find more information on the Outsider?
The Outsiders House Museum, www.theoutsidershouse.com. In social media, I'm out there. Tulsa, Oklahoma is the place to be. I feel like the smartest dude that left LA a couple years before it got crazy. I love the Midwest. I love Tulsa, Oklahoma, and I think if you haven't been here or looking to get out of the major cities, come check us out. I think you'll love it. There's more to it than just the Outsider's House, but I'll let you discover it on your own, and look us up if you find your way out here.
All right, guys, check them out. Danny, thank you, brother, for being on the podcast.
Man, I appreciate you. Stay gold.
Thanks for being in recovery, rock stars. I guess today's episode is done. In all seriousness, though, Kevin appreciates you being part of this community. RecoveryRockstars.com. Want to email us? Kevin@RecoveryRockstars.com. Facebook, Recovery Rockstars. Instagram us @RecoveryRockstars. Kevin's Wardrobe brought to you by Kevin. Kevin's Transportation brought to you by Kevin. Kevin's cable bill paid by Kevin so he can keep this podcast going. Goodbye.